Northumberland County, David Robertson from TechOut Technology Services, in support from the Canadian Department of Heritage and the Digital Citizen Contribution Program, want to thank you for joining us on this presentation on how to stop the COVID-19 infodemic. Prepare, be careful, and stay strong. Prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Don't take unnecessary risks that may put you or your family in danger of being infected. Stay resolute in your convictions to fight the battle against COVID-19. When in our lifetimes have we been affected by a virus that has had such a wide-spreading, long-lasting impact as we have with COVID-19? Never. In this presentation, we will be taking a deep look at what we know, what we don't, and some ways to create the best outcomes for ourselves, our friends and families, and our community. Not once in our lifetimes do we remember going through such a devastating pandemic. Not unless you're over 100 years old and remember 1918. History has a habit of repeating itself. And COVID-19, or should I say an influenza pandemic, is nothing new to the world. Throughout history, plagues like wildfires have been scorching the earth, leaving death and destruction in their path. From the plague of Justinian in 541, which is said to have originated in Egypt and spread across Europe, Asia, and North Africa, killing an estimated 30 to 50 million people, what was thought to be half of the world's population at the time. Or the European Black Death of Europe, which claimed an astonishing 200 million lives in just 4 years. Which is thought to be the first recorded attempt at quarantining when sailors were forced to stay on their ships for 40 days when entering port to prove that they were not sick. Or smallpox, where 90 to 95% of indigenous people in North America died. Mexico's native population went from 11 million down to 1 million. Centuries later, smallpox became the first virus epidemic to be ended by a vaccine. In the late 18th century, a British doctor named Edward Jenner discovered that milkmaids infected with a milder virus called cowpox seemed immune to smallpox. Jenner famously inoculated his gardener's 9-year-old son with cowpox and then exposed him to the smallpox virus with no ill effect. Although this was far too late for far too many, it was the first pandemic to be ended by a vaccine. In 1980, the World Health Organization, or WHO, announced that smallpox had been eradicated from the earth. Finally, and most recently, the Spanish flu, which infected an estimated 500 million people with an estimated death toll of over 50 million people, happened in 1918. This had the distinction of being the most tragic case that closely compares to what we're currently facing today, as they are primarily transmitted by respiratory droplets and aerosols. So what did we learn from all of these things, and why do we still see infections? We learned quarantining can work. It was noted when first used in the Black Death epidemic that doing so definitely had an effect. We learned that vaccinations can be created and can be successful against pandemics like in the case of smallpox. We learned that using measures like PPEs and social distancing, along with washing your hands, can also be effective measures against a virus's spread through respiratory means as proven in the Spanish flu of 1918. We also know that herd immunity can sometimes work against certain types of viral outbreaks, as it was awarded the ultimate victory over the Spanish flu and helped some against smallpox. With all this knowledge from years past, why haven't we cracked the COVID-19 case? Let's take a look at what we know. We know this is a novel virus. Therefore, it's new, and we don't understand exactly how it will transform or evolve. We don't know what the long-term side effects will be, nor do we know exactly how long it will take to eradicate through either vaccine or herd immunity. Nor do we know if herd immunity or a vaccine will be effective against new or mutated strains. Now that we have some backstory on the prevalence and danger of the virus that caused this pandemic, let's take a look at the various ways that you can ensure that you're getting the correct information when it comes to the COVID-19 virus. If you joined us for the presentation on mis- and disinformation and media bias, you may already be aware of some of the ways that we can fact-check on the internet. The same tools we discussed in that presentation can be utilized to check news and social media articles concerning COVID-19. Excellent sites to do your fact-checking on still include factcheck.org, which has a dedicated section just for COVID-19, including a section that checks reports for the source of the article, whether it be Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, online blog, or a television news agency. Snopes does a great job of breaking down the articles and pointing out what's real and what's fake, and what's factual mixed and why. IFCN, the International Fact-Checking Network from the Poynter Institute, has created a Coronavirus Facts Alliance that spans over 70 countries. This features headlines and has a search engine that lets you search by country, rating, and organization. Google has started their own fact-check section dedicated to the coronavirus, which is in their toolbox section, and is only fitting that it's widely thought to be the world's best and heavily used search engine. And the Canadian Standard for Scrutinizing All Things Digital, Media Smarts, Canada Centre for Digital and Media Literacy. Canadian sites. Canada is not without its own resources when it comes to fact-checking the COVID-19 misinformation. These are just a few of the best Canadian sites dedicated to fixing COVID-19 false facts. You can use these sites to help you understand the resources that are out there for you as a worker, out of work due to COVID, affected by symptoms related to COVID, along with local, regional, provincial, and federal guidelines concerning the rules and regulations in our area. The Canadian Centre for Occupational Health and Safety, your gateway to a comprehensive collection of free, credible guidance tools and resources. The CCOHS has great sections on many Canadian online resources dedicated to the COVID-19 infodemic. It does a good job of looking at COVID-19 from a regulation and workplace safety standpoint. If you are an employee or an employer working in a COVID-affected industry, use this to help you answer your work-related health and safety concerns. Also, be sure to check out the Government Canada's public health site, which has current information about prevention and risks, symptoms and treatment, and travel restriction exemptions. This resource has great advice for those who need travel, along with their own sections on fact-checking, including virtual assistant, digital fact sheets, printable posters, and shareable videos. The UOT, University of Toronto, has a great listing of fact-checking sites, including some more in-depth sites for medical professionals or for those of you who like to deep dive into your own research. Check out ihealthfacts.ie, where they answer questions like, does air conditioning spread COVID-19? Or can COVID-19 survive in water? Coronavirus has the dubious distinction of being the first virus pandemic to hit us during the social media age, where we have access to instant news and opinion media. The scale of the information we receive is nearly immeasurable. Given the political climate and the real economic, mental, and physical health-related tolls it's played on everyone around the globe, it's no wonder that so much of the information we receive has to be classified as mis- or disinformation, if not misleading information. Take a closer look at some of the tools we can use to ensure the information we are taking in is as accurate as possible. Most of the sites grant you the ability to search for an article that you may have seen on social media feeds, on a website, or even heard of or seen in the news. Understand if you hear a claim that may sound outlandish or overly far-fetched. You may need to wait for the information to be vetted properly by these sites, or the information may be too obscure to report on. This is why it's important to know if the news-related media that you're taking in is coming from reliable sources or not. Okay, first, check the source. If it comes from a source you deem reliable with minimal bias, then you're most likely good, because the New York Times is scrutinized much more heavily than, say, the New York Evening. So even if there is misinformation in one of the articles, you are much more likely to have someone report on it the next day. If it's not from a known source, cross-reference the information in a Google search to see who else is reporting. Still nothing credible? Then check out one of the many resources out there to check. I find factcheck.org and snopes.com to be the best. There are useful informational websites and tools out there to help you better understand bias in the media. This chart found at mediabiaschart.com helps identify and list news media outlets and where they stand on whether they are original and fact-based, are fact-based, analysis-based with opinion-based, some fair persuasion, selective or unfair with persuasion pieces, propaganda or untrue fabricated stories. This chart also describes on what side of the aisle the news reports on, conservative or liberal. Now, let's take a look at a local news story. Ontario MPP kicked out Ford's caucus after letter claims lockdowns are deadlier than COVID. This one hits particularly close to home, as there have been mailings with the information claimed by the MPP circulating within Northumberland County. The MPP claimed that the CDC had updated their survival rate and produced a chart that was miles off what the CDC, or anyone else, has claimed that the survival rates actually are, claiming the overall survival rate is 99.98%. He makes other claims about the negative side effects of locking down the province, including claims of increased opioid use, suicide, weight gain, bankruptcies, and others that most likely have some correlations to lockdowns, but cannot be directly blamed on lockdown specifically. Let's take a look at Google's fact-checking tool that can be found at toolbox.google.com/factcheck. Now, let's examine the myth about how vitamin C has the ability to cure COVID-19. Simply search for the story. As you can see, there's a lot of stories related to this topic. The Google fact check does a great job making reference to the source, so you can start to discover if some news agencies or social media influencers have a tendency to give false or unverified information. You can also see that some of our old friends have shown up, including the Associated Press, which, if you check the media bias chart, always ranks highest in honest reporting. PolitiFact, FactCheck.org, and AFP FactCheck also make appearances in this article. Snopes is another great tool with a section within the collection area located at the top right on the menu bar, dedicated specifically to coronavirus fact-checking. You can find it by directly typing snopes.com/collections/new-coronavirus-collection. Or you can search it within snopes.com or google.com searching Corona Fact Check. Let's take a look at more misinformation and how Snopes can help. Let's search for something I see a lot of people questioning. Medical masks don't work. As you can see, there are a lot of articles to look through. Let's look at, is Ron Paul video true in saying masks don't work to combat COVID? Snopes gives this heading a false rating. Now let's take a look at one of the better sites for medical information with its own section on coronavirus, the World Health Organization. The World Health Organization is a specialized agency of the United Nations responsible for international public health. The WHO Constitution, which establishes the agency's governing structure and principles, states its main objective as the attainment by all peoples of the highest possible level of health. The World Health Organization has a great website with great information concerning all things coronavirus, including a great Science in 5 section where there's a series of short 5-minute videos featuring interviews from world experts concerning popular topics surrounding the COVID-19 pandemic. It provides a global viewpoint on how many other United Nations members and their experts are dealing with the pandemic at large.
Hello and welcome to Science in 5, WHO's Conversations in Science. I'm Vismita Gupta-Smith, and this is the series where WHO experts will explain the science related to COVID-19 so that you can protect yourself and your loved ones. In today's show, we are talking to WHO's Chief Scientist, Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, and she is going to explain herd immunity. Welcome, Soumya.
Thank you.
Soumya, we are hearing a lot about herd immunity. So let's start with, please tell us, what is herd immunity?
So let's take an example of a disease like measles, which is a very common childhood infectious illness caused by measles virus, for which there's a very effective vaccine. Now we say that to achieve herd immunity in the population, for measles, you need about 95% of the people to have immunity or antibodies. Even if you have 5% of children not vaccinated, these others actually have enough protection in the population to prevent the measles virus from actually going from one person to the next. So it's really like having a barrier of people who are protected, who break that chain of transmission. So you don't need every single person in the area, in the population to necessarily be protected.
Is it the right way to think about herd immunity in the context of COVID to say the vaccine is far away, why don't we just let everyone get infected?
So the SARS-CoV-2 virus is a highly transmissible virus. We think it needs at least 60 to 70% of the population to have immunity to really break the chain of transmission. If you allow this to happen naturally, it will take a long time, of course, but more importantly, it's going to do a lot of collateral damage. So even if 1% of people who get infected are ultimately going to die, then this can add up to a huge number of people if you look at the global population. And that is why we believe it's not a good idea to try to achieve herd immunity by just letting the infection run wild in the population and infect a lot of people. And that we should talk about herd immunity in the context of a vaccine.
So let me come to the vaccine now. So our strategy is to vaccinate enough people rather than just letting people get infected. Is that where the science is now?
That's right. Because with a vaccine, you can achieve immunity and herd immunity safely. Through natural infection, you could also achieve it at some point, but it would be at great human cost. And so naturally, the better choice is doing it through a vaccine.
Those are preventable deaths, right? We can actually, even though we don't have a vaccine, we don't have therapeutics right now, we can actually slow down and save those lives rather than just let it spread, right? Speak to us about that.
Exactly. So there are actions now that we can take which can help to slow down transmission, to control it, to try to contain it, and also we know how to manage people better. The other measures that are effective are, of course, the public health and social measures that we talk about, the physical distancing, making sure you're wearing a mask when you're in crowded settings, when washing your hands frequently. Those are the modes by which you can actually prevent the virus from transmitting from one person to the next. And then on the side of being able to detect rapidly those who are infected in the community, making sure that enough testing is available so that you're able to detect and diagnose people, be able to isolate them, then test their contacts and quarantine them. These are the measures that have been shown to be successful. They are hard work, they are difficult to implement, but it's worth doing because then you're saving lives till the time that we have both more effective medicines to treat this disease and, of course, a safe and effective vaccine.
Thank you, Soumya. There you have it, WHO's chief scientist explaining herd immunity. Join us next time in our series Science in 5. Until then, stay safe and stick with science. Bye-bye.
Questions? So how bad is this? To put it into perspective, here are the states as of February this year, just over a year, in which we have had nearly 110 million reported cases and nearly 2.4 million deaths. It's bad. Let's compare this to the 2018-2019 flu season. CDC estimated that influenza was associated with more than 35.5 million illnesses, more than 16.5 million medical visits, 490,600 hospitalizations, and 34,200 deaths during the 2018-2019 influenza season. The worst season in the last 10 years for influenza was reported in the 2017-28 season and was estimated 45 million influenza illnesses, 21 million influenza-associated medical visits, 810,000 influenza-related hospitalizations, and 61,000 influenza-associated deaths. As you can see, the infection rate, and most notably the death rate for COVID-19 versus influenza, is much higher, with COVID taking 375 times more lives in a comparable span than influenza. Although the infection rate was relatively high with 45 million reported cases, COVID infecting just 2.5 times more people. This means the effective death rate is 150 times higher in COVID than it is in influenza. Questions? What's worse? With coronavirus comes a long list of potential lingering after effects. The most commonly reported long-term symptoms include fatigue, shortness of breath, cough, joint pain, chest pain. Other reported long-term symptoms include difficulty with thinking and concentration, sometimes referred to as brain fog, depression, muscle pain, headache, intermittent fever, fast beating or pounding heart, also known as heart palpitations. More serious long-term complications appear to be less common, but have been reported. These have been noted to affect different organ systems in the body. These include cardiovascular, inflammation of the heart muscle, respiratory, lung function abnormalities, renal, acute kidney injury, dermatologic, rash and hair loss, neurological, smell and taste problems, sleep issues, difficulty with concentration, and memory problems, psychiatric, depression, anxiety, and changes in mood. So you're young. This doesn't make you immune from the harmful effects of the COVID-19 virus. Most notably, a report from the Mayo Clinic states concerning potential long-term issues caused by COVID-19. Even in young people, COVID-19 can cause strokes, seizures, and Guillain-Barré syndrome, a condition that causes temporary paralysis. COVID-19 may also increase the risk of developing Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's disease. Coronavirus is here. It's real. But there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So what should we do? In the words of British government, keep calm and carry on. There are many reasons for the misinformation that we receive. Pandemics aren't easy, and I think most of us can say that we have never been through anything like this before with the economic, social, and mental health impact we have all seen and felt. It's not hard to question whether this has all been worth it. The fact of the matter is that there are still questions that need answers. There are still unknowns we need to cautiously work through. The same way pandemics are nothing new, neither is what we need to do next. Hope for the best and plan for the worst. After all, I believe this is our human nature, isn't it? We wear seatbelts every time we ride in cars. We pay for insurance to protect our homes and property. We otherwise do our best to act in responsible ways to keep our families, ourselves, and the ones we love safe from prosecution and the unknown. Here is some other good news. Guess how long it takes to develop a good habit? According to Healthline.com, it takes between 18 and 254 days with an average of 66, meaning we should all feel somewhat accustomed to washing our hands before we go out and after we return. We're used to wearing PPEs, washing our hands, and social distancing. These practices are not necessarily a bad thing. Washing hands and maintaining a 6-foot distance is an annoyance. Wearing PPE all the time is something that's much more difficult to deal with. That's why we all need to do our part, so those most at risk, including our elderly, our health workers, and all the other frontline workers that are out there every day putting themselves at risk. We need to do it for them so they can be safe and can get some relief from the incredible strain it must be to endure day in and day out. With the disruption that COVID-19 has caused in everyone's lives, it's no wonder why we've seen so much and misinformation about the pandemic around the world. Even before the pandemic hit, it seemed like the truth was getting away from us. And with the interferences it's run, it's hard to blame those hardest hit looking for any glimmer of hope that may quickly come from around the corner. It's also hard to not be cynical about those who may be fear-mongering or profiteering off of COVID. It's easier to find someone or something to blame rather than a virus that some conspiracists say is no worse than the common flu. We know that pandemics and COVID are real things. We've seen friends and family affected. We've seen the stats on the news about those who have died. We've also heard from survivors about some of the lingering side effects from contracting the illness. We know that there are well-trained individuals and great technologies to assist in figuring out the best course of action and the best techniques to stop the spread. We also know that vaccines have been created and are being administered. The path has been laid out for us. We know that herd immunity can help eradicate this virus. We know who are most at risk. We've developed new ways of communication. We've learned to adapt. So we need to stay the course. We need to listen to the experts and put our faith in them the same way we would with our own doctors and medical professionals. The safety of those most vulnerable is worth a few more weeks or months and even years of practicing social distancing, wearing PPEs, and doing everything we can to stop the spread.